Zeidenberg, who is a partner with Arent Fox and defended Xiaoxing in his case. And then to his right, we've got Alexander Greer, who's president of the Committee of Concerned Scientists. And I think what we're going to try to do now, having heard those very eloquent, and personal stories about the importance of academic exchange, I think we want to drill down a little bit deeper into some of the complicated questions of racial profiling versus protecting security, and how do you draw those lines. So, actually, if you don't mind, and we'll probably go over I'll ask some of the same questions, so we want to hear your thoughts on the same questions that Arent was asking. Great questions just now.
The mic is not on. I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
It's still
Okay.
off.
All right, I'll just hold the mic up, and I guess we all have to hold our mic up high. But so, Alexander, if we could maybe start with you from the perspective of the Committee of Concerned Scientists. I know you've been very concerned about racial profiling, and that you've written letters defending a number of Chinese scientists. So, can you talk about your perspective on what's happening now? Perhaps you'll echo some of the things we've just heard, but does it feel, I think that Yiguang referred to a kind of a return to the Red Scare of the McCarthy era in the 1950s. Is it feeling that way to you? What does it feel like?
Well, I'm here to learn and actually gain some insight as to whether it's reached that level. If you don't mind, I'd like to just read a couple of comments first, which that can actually help.
Louder.
As long as you hold the microphone up, you can do whatever you want.
So,
Louder.
So I thank you for the opportunity to serve on this panel and to be here. So my name is Alexander Greer. I'm a professor of chemistry at Brooklyn College and co-chair of the Committee of Concerned Scientists. The Committee of Concerned Scientists is an independent organization of scientists.
I just want to make sure this is short, right? You're not going to read a long thing, right?
It'll take just a couple of minutes.
Okay, but we really want to get into the discussion. If we can, because time is very limited.
I can certainly say that I'll try to bring a human rights perspective to this. So the Committee of Concerned Scientists expresses its concern to what it believes to be ethnic profiling and unwarranted investigations of Chinese scientists by the U.S. government, including American citizens and permanent residents. We believe that ethnic profiling and investigation of Chinese scientists has no place in our country. Importantly, it's counterproductive, since free academic exchange between scientists in the U.S. and China is crucial for discoveries to be made and will be, in turn, beneficial to the United States. Furthermore, not only damages the image of the United States, but it also harms some of the best scientists here and making them consider to leave the U.S. So we've written on, I do want to just emphasize that as you had highlighted before, this is not a new phenomenon. So we've the Committee of Concerned Scientists has written letters on behalf of cases such as this dating back to 1999 with the scientists from Los Alamos National Laboratory, as well as the hydrologists at the National Weather Service, Xiaoxing Xi as well. Let me just mention so that these are those examples that we've written on behalf of before number about half a dozen. So they seem to be dwarfed, or by comparison to the campaign that has begun, from what we can tell, and I'm here to learn. In the spring of 2019, with the warning of issued by the U.S. medical centers to U.S. medical centers by the NIH, with the topics exactly that are so concerning and where tenured professors have lost their positions in certain cases. Let me add, my fellow co-chair Eugene Chudnovsky stated in connection with the U.S. cancer cases that are of interest. There's little justification for decoupling of the U.S. cancer research from that of China under the pretext of intellectual property. Naively, one could think that this would benefit the U.S. pharmaceutical industry more than it would benefit U.S. citizens. So a combined effort to fight cancer by the U.S. and by China and the U.S. would lead to faster progress. So synergy in a key way. So we do not know personally of anybody, so we're just meeting people just today, that has been affected by this campaign. So we do not see it as reaching a massive scale. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you very much.
Thanks, it's really, really helpful. So, Ruth, first, thank you so much for participating. Ruth joined the closed-door dialogue this afternoon, and you shared lots of very interesting legal perspectives. And I just want to ask you from the legal point of view, you know, I know that you said that compliance and non-compete issues are very important to U.S. and Chinese companies, both of them, that are competing for technologies. So tell us a little bit about the reason for these investigations. Is this all just a bunch of, is this a red scare, or is there some basis for these investigations?
And so first I want to just briefly talk about my background so people know that what I'm talking about. I have the insight into it. I do capital markets and securities law compliance. And so my partner is a former New York Attorney General. So I advise companies and employees on compliance side. And when somebody get into trouble, we have litigators led by Arent Koppell, who is a former New York Attorney General, who defend them and answer subpoenas and all that. So I have the insight into both ends. You know, as the prior panelist said, maintaining supremacy in technology now became a national interest. No question about it. Nobody should dispute that. So let's just scale back and talk about private sector. So if you are a trader at Goldman Sachs or Two Sigma, some of the top hedge funds, they guard their trade secret like nothing else. It's so important that they guard that. So they have a very strict compliance in terms of what you can take to your home, who you can send your email to. It's in private sector on Wall Street. And you know, about 7 years ago, somebody working in top hedge fund, a Chinese person, took something home. They immediately got alerted, and next morning 4 a.m. he was arrested. So from my experience, I rarely the law enforcement arrests somebody without basis. So I think at this point, the competition between U.S. and China become very important. And from the U.S. perspective, they're elevating the private sector, the compliance and private sector practice to the national level. I don't think they want you to make your competitors smart. Unless if you're getting something from them, that's okay. When the book was read, they're okay for you to get something. I mean, that's how it is with this private sector. If you are sending email from Goldman to Merrill Lynch, when every email is reviewed, you shouldn't be expecting that your email is private. So if you are sending email to your competitor, they will review it, and it better be really have nothing in there. And so, I don't think it's completely baseless. I rarely, we have cases that we're handling right now. There are always some basis for the government to issue subpoena and want to know what you're doing, why this happened. So I haven't seen a baseless investigation so far.
That's such an interesting perspective, and it raises real questions about, the issues that Xi Xiaoxing and Yiguang were talking about in terms of open research and open source research and the importance of that. So if you have in the scientific community, there's real value, the belief that there is real value of American scientists such as themselves working together with their Chinese colleagues, but now there's a whole new element added because we have a kind of, in the Maoijian and the competitive strategic competition.
Right, so
where do you draw the line, and how do scientists like Yiguang and Xi Xiaoxing and all the others, how do they know what's okay and what's not okay?
So I think it's a new era, a new normal. I think a lot of universities need to adopt the policies that the private sectors adopt. In the private sector, if you did something like that, you'll be immediately fired. It really depends on certain situations, but a lot of hedge funds and Wall Street firms, they give you no mercy. They will have you arrested. They need to make sure that that thing is not leaving your strategy, your trading strategy, all the whatever you did doesn't leave your property in the companies. And they will show you no mercy. So I think a lot of universities probably is going to have to kind of gradually come up with some kind of guideline for the professors, And in the private sector, if you are managing director at Goldman, for example, for you to be sitting on the board of a whatever institution, including alumni association institution, you need a prior approval. If you are working for government, you need to have an ethics office, you need to review what you're doing, where you're going to do a speech. You do have that compliance. And I think, scientists has enjoyed a lot of freedom, doing whatever university, giving talks and lectures, making your competitors smart. And they did whatever they wanted. I think it's a little different now. They do need to probably come up with some kind of guideline for the universities, and when the professors go somewhere, like in China, Chinese professors come here, they need approval. So they probably need to have some kind of ethics office and compliance office in place in university, review their travel schedule, what they're trying to do, and make sure not only they can attract the scientists, but also they're having activities within the safe zone, so that they can do the research without getting into trouble.
So I want to come back to that. I'm going to turn to you,
I got to
Peter.
respond.
Absolutely, and I'm going to turn to you, but the only thing is I just want to put a pin in that question, because I want to come back afterwards to China's government's strategy and the games that they play with Chinese scientists. So, but please, Peter.
I think that what you're suggesting would be anathema to scientists. I am not a scientist, I don't have a scientific background, but all of my clients are scientists. I represent exclusively Chinese American scientists, and so I have become, starting with Sherry Chen, and the NOAA hydrologist, and then Professor Xi, and since then, probably 36 others. And I can tell you, and the scientists here know, that the comparison, and I also represent people who work in private industry. The worlds are entirely different. The culture of scientists, it is anathema to think that you cannot share information. I remember so clearly the interview, which was tape recorded, of Professor Xi, and this is, it was videotaped, and this was when I was new to this world. And the agent was asking Professor Xi if he provided samples, and these were thin filmed samples, which he was sharing with scientists around the world. And he said, "Do you share those samples with scientists in China? And have you sent them to other?" And Professor Xi said, "Yes, of course." And my heart sank, because I was like, oh no, this sounds really bad. He just admitted this, and then I am putting together the package of affidavits that we submitted to the government. I spoke with these world-renowned physicists from all parts of the world. They were studying all over the world. And they said...
They're all Chinese or...
No.
Yeah.
They were all different ethnicities. They were American, but they were studying in Italy, and they were studying all over the world. And they were, world-renowned. And they said, "Oh, Professor Xi's samples were the best. We all got, wanted the samples to test and to experiment on." And so the idea that this was somehow,
Some kind of crime.
that he's doing something unethical or improper, much less illegal, was, in Professor Xi's words, absurd. And the problem with this is, and I've seen this in Professor Xi's case, I saw it in Sherry Chen's case, and I've seen it as a through line through all the cases that I have, is that the agents who investigate these cases are not scientists. And they do not consult with scientists. And so the issue that I see again and again now is that if you're a scientist and you have had any interaction with the 1,000 Talents program, you have a target on your back. And the government is going to go through, it's very likely, I don't want to make people paranoid, but you should be aware that there is a very high degree of likelihood that your emails are being reviewed just like they were down at MD Anderson and at Emory University, and they are looking for what they consider to be contradictions where you did not disclose something. And again, I've seen this where people are getting grants. And so scientists specialize. They're in a particular field of study. And so they're working on a grant in China, and then they're applying for a grant in the United States. And the agents say, you are double dipping. You are trying to get paid in the United States for research you are doing in China. And they don't appreciate that there may be 50,000 papers published on that topic, so that there's a million varieties and flavors of that topic. So all they see is a topic, and they say, we've got you. And they don't do the necessary research themselves to see what the differences are, and they make their own conclusions. They issue the subpoena, sometimes they just get a search warrant, and it's for nothing. And I'll tell you something, when you go through someone's emails, these Emory University professors, he was fired without even an opportunity to respond. They just went through his emails. They said, we don't think you've disclosed this. We've done an investigation. Here's the letter. You're gone. 25 years, he's a tenured professor. No due process, no chance to respond. And unfortunately, that is the world that, that the people out here are confronting.
So Alexander, I can see you're squirming in your chair, but Alexander, I want to give you a chance. I see you nodding your head, so I want to hear your thoughts.
This collaborative aspect of science is very rich. This is part of our culture. I mean, it's just absolutely no question the importance to this type of free collaborative efforts across countries.
Do you work with scientists in other countries often?
Absolutely. Yeah. Latin America, Europe. So I come in with on behalf of the Committee of Concerned Scientists, to bring in the human rights dimension, which I try to think about. And clearly, what's happening is a human rights violation by our government. That's our opinion. I also want to highlight that both governments have human rights violations. And it hasn't been really emphasized here yet, so I would like to bring that up because we feel it's an important topic. That there is not much said. There's a silence among Chinese Americans, and indeed among many American citizens themselves, but importantly Chinese Americans, critical of egregious human rights violations in China. There are 1.5 million Uyghurs in internment camps. So I realize you didn't want to bring that, but that is, we feel that it is a connecting point as to why this, in this picture.
Thank you for that. Ruth, I know you wanted to respond, Peter.
So nobody said you cannot share. It's disclosures you pointed out. If I represent a lot of financial institutions. If you are going to share and the employee manual said you need to have a pre-disclosure and approval, let our compliance office give you a sign-off. And you consistently not disclosing, even if it's benign, you end up not doing anything, you probably will be fired. And in fact, I'll give you one example that I already disclosed, which is in a Hong Kong publicly traded financial institution. In Asia, it's top 5. So I don't want to name names. And in about 8-9 years ago, he decided to set up a U.S. headquarters office subsidiary, for which we were engaged as a U.S. counsel. And it specifically hired this former Chinese professor, who was a big professor from some university here, to be the CEO. Consistently, he wasn't following the employee manual. Please don't use your personal email. He was nothing, no harm done in the end, but we end up firing because we got so nervous. Please don't do this. Oh, what's the big deal? I need to work from home. It was, in the end, we couldn't get through to him. We end up firing that professor. So for university, it's really not about what you actually, in that prior 7 years ago, the 2 Sigma case, who were arrested at 4 in the morning, he did take that information, this trading. The quants shouldn't take those information back home. They immediately notified. He did admit it, and he was supposed to be sentenced for 3 years, but we made a deal, and he was sent back to China, and you really can't do that. So it's about going through the proper employee manual. If there's nothing going on, get the proper disclosure, go through the internal procedure. Secondly, 5 years ago of China is different now. Suppose it's North Korea. Suppose North Korea is sending email. Yes, maybe it's nothing you think. Maybe it's just, I'm sending whatever email to North Korean graduate student, nothing. But for the law enforcement, it would trigger something, and from my experience, a lot of times there's a whistleblower. Right now we have 6 Chinese defendants getting investigated, and it was investigated because there was a whistleblower that what they're doing is really, a violation of this and so I don't think, it's completely baseless for the U.S. law enforcement to launch an investigation or subpoena some documents. Want to see what's actually going on, and actually 16 weeks and then getting a case dropped is
okay. The confusing and difficult part, I think, I know you want to say something, Peter, but is, as you just said, the goalpost has moved. So 5 years ago, we had a different scenario. The U.S. and China were not in the middle of a trade war, and China was not seen as a strategic, enemy or whatever. And that's now changed, and that, I would imagine, creates a very confusing and difficult situation for Chinese scientists, Chinese American scientists. And I want to make 2 points that sort of contradict each other. The first is that, China has, well, the first is to follow up on that point, and that is that, universities probably don't have the kinds of guidelines that you're talking about in the private sector. I'm guessing that you don't have these kinds of books or whatever that say, you can do this, you can't do this, except for, you said a few years ago, it was quite simple. You knew it was IP or whatever. So that needs to evolve, I guess. But the other thing I wanted to add, just to kind of play devil's advocate for a minute, is China has a very, very clever way of keeping its top intellectuals very close. And whether it's China's strategy of firstly always referring to Chinese people as, we're all Chinese, 我们都是中国人, and it's 同胞, and, please come back, and then you have the 天人计划, you've got 1,000 talents. I know you said that, Xi Xiaoxing was saying many countries have this, but at any rate, we're talking about China right now. So China has this policy of trying to, and actually, I think you were saying, Yiguang, that the rules, they're very flexible. It's like, okay, no problem. You can't spend a whole semester here, that's okay. You can just spend a little bit of time here and then continue your work at Princeton. So China, the Communist Party, the government, is playing a very clever game, I think. So I want to ask, I guess both of you lawyers, do you really see it as a black and white issue, or is there a gray area when it it comes to academic exchange? I mean, it seems to me that it's very confusing and complicated.
I think academic exchange is really new right now. That is really, the US government is now suddenly realizing that we need to really focus on this. And in China, it is clever. They do pre-approve the professors. And based on their subject, they say you can, before they come to States. And if there's something they want to protect, they say you cannot go there more than 2 weeks. They limit how much time you can spend. But if it's something we want to learn, okay, you go there whole summer. So they are doing that. US has not been. And for the US, I do understand that they do want to maintain the supremacy in technology. And the Chinese government, the system is really not democratic. It's not a government that you can really trust in terms of human rights. And for them to catching up, I do think they want to make sure, I don't want to make my competitors smart. So I do think they welcome Chinese scientists. But you work for me. Where is your allegiance? Are you working for me, or are you double dipping, and what is it? So I think
China, those lines are very blurred. It's the idea of national borders, because to China it's like 我们都是中国人.
Right.
We're all Chinese.
Right.
So even if you're an American citizen, I think that puts Chinese scientists in a very difficult position because it's very confusing.
It is, and then there's a cultural situation. I'm a lawyer and I'm in private practice, and there's a lot of legal technique that my team and I spend hours and hours billing our clients a lot of money to come up with a structure and document. And my Chinese Peking University classmates like, hey, how did you do that deal? Give me that document. Like, pay me. My classmates, you need to give me. No, this is not just my work, it's my team. If you want to do that, you need to do your own work, because this is my bread and butter. I don't want to make you smart and take my clients. So there is a culturally, because we're the same Chinese from same university or some, you need to help me. And I think there's a cultural thing there as well.
Peter.
I think we're talking about apples and oranges.
These are professor scientists, and we don't represent scientists. So
I
talk about
I represented a scientist who worked at GSK. Is charged with theft of trade secrets. Very, very different case. Okay, there was a lot of problems with that case. Aside from that, where I think the government, with anything connected with China, had she been going to Belgium, I don't think anyone would have been interested in prosecuting that case. That's a different issue. She shouldn't have been sending emails to her home email address. She shouldn't have been sharing information. She didn't think it was sensitive, what have you. But that's entirely different than what scientists are doing when they are working with colleagues around the world. They can't, and I'm educated on this. I mean, Professor Xi could speak to this much more intelligently than I can, but this is what I've observed and learned, is that these barriers, these walls don't exist. They are not talking about intellectual property. They are not talking about trade secrets. Nothing is classified. Nothing is controlled. So and they're all going to publish their findings. So the notion that they can't send or share or collaborate is just it's a bizarre notion to scientists, and the problem is, I think that these FBI agents come in here and they have a different mindset, and they see, oh, you're working on a grant, and now you're talking to these other people, and now what's going on here? And they literally do not understand the culture, they don't understand the mindset, and now they're bringing this case, it's a wire fraud, a 20-year felony. For someone who they're not even trying to make any money. There is no intent to fraud, because they're not, they're not being remunerated, they're being paid a college professor's salary. So, you know, what I think is that it's become a criminalization based on a paranoia. And when I am not in a position to comment on or deny that, you know, with the concerns from our Justice Department and the FBI saying that there's widespread intellectual property theft going on by the Chinese. You know, I'm agnostic on that. I'm not saying it's not happening. All I'm saying is and I've read about cases that look pretty serious, the allegations, you know. But that's a big country, and there's a lot of scientists. There's always going to be some people who are going to do bad things. I don't know that that means, you know, to me it doesn't mean that there's a crime spree going on. And I can tell you with a high degree of confidence, based on a lot of experience, that the cases that I'm seeing, not all of them, but a very large percentage of them are completely misconstrued. That they do not understand what is going on and they're assuming the worst. And in another context, you know, as an attorney, I would be getting, you know, they would be getting a target warning, which is what should have happened with Professor Xi. He should have been notified.
Yeah.
I mean, worst case scenario, that's what should have happened. They should have said, we got some concerns, you need to get a lawyer, bring him in. And before he got arrested in front of his family, we could have diffused this. And so they're not doing that. They're treating these people and then they lock them up. And, you know, I had a client in Tennessee who spent 3 months in solitary confinement in a county jail, 66-year-old scientist, for working on a commercial nuclear power plant in China that the United States has gave 2 tons of enriched uranium to run. It's a Westinghouse power plant. And they're treating him like he's a criminal for working on, you know, a commercial nuclear power plant. He's, you know, as if he's a proliferator of nuclear technology.
So I'm going to ask one last question from me, and then let's open it to questions, because I know everybody's looking very much like they have lots of questions they want to ask you. But I want to ask you to put yourselves in their shoes. In other words, in the FBI's shoes. We had at the closed door session today, we had some people who were former prosecutors. Okay, we didn't have anybody from the FBI, but we did have former prosecutors. And one of them said, listen, he basically said, firstly, in 2018, I think it was November, there was this new, newly enacted, the kind of China initiative, which literally said the Department of Justice has a specific, is now specifically targeting China and people who are connected to China for, you know, the work they're doing in America. So that's kind of an incredible thing. But he said because of that, therefore, within the FBI, they're increasing the manpower. You know, the people who are pursuing these investigations and cases. And he said the new people don't have any experience in working on China cases at all. And his point was that basically this is it's a very blunt weapon. Right, they're basically people who have no expertise in the area. You said, of course, they don't consult scientists. There's no expertise, you know, and so, you know, so their job is to be doing what they do, which is he said that basically they don't think about the ramifications of, you know, the emails that are being searched and all this stuff. They're just searching the emails because they want to find the data. That's what they are, basically. So that's one thing he said. The other thing he said, which was I think a very interesting kind of perspective on it, was remember after 9/11, when the New York Police Department had no experience in the Islamic community, in the Muslim community in New York whatsoever, and they were flat-footed, and they had to very quickly develop contacts and experience and stuff, and that was his way of kind of explaining the really scary story of, you know, getting a phone call from the FBI from someone who says they want to have coffee with you, which is a terrifying thing to me. I would feel terrified if it happened to me. But that's kind of, he was making the suggestion that that's the FBI's effort to kind of develop contacts in the community, because their job is to try to have sources and, you know, find intelligence. So just given that sort of, it was just interesting perspective that he threw into the conversation, and I want you to put yourself in their shoes and suggest what would be a better way for them to pursue their job.
Well, I have a very concrete suggestion, which is they should either be hiring agents with a greater scientific background, but that's probably not realistic, because even if you're a physicist, now you're working with a biochemist, and if you're not a biochemist, you're working with a molecular biologist or something, all these different fields, and they're all PhDs and they're all brilliant. So even people in that field, even someone who's like a physicist wouldn't understand what all different physicists are doing. So what they need to do is they have to reach out to subject matter experts, which the US government has in abundance at all these different labs we have around the country. So it's just, why they don't take these emails and say, this is what it looks like to me.
What does it mean?
What do you think? Before they get an arrest warrant and a search warrant and kick in someone's door.
I wonder if, given the current political environment in the States, and that, Washington is stirring up all this incredibly anti-China rhetoric, does that sort of add, is there a political element to this stuff as well?
Well, it is, this is just human experience. Everyone knows this. If a agency, where you're working, there is a emphasis and a priority on X, then you are going to produce X.
Right.
And there is going to be a much wider net, and there's going to be a much lower threshold to produce that. And you are incentivized, because your supervisor is going to get an accolade, the U.S. attorney is going to get an accolade, the agent's going to get an accolade, everyone's going to get a pat on the back, and they're going to say, great job, this is what we're looking for.
Yes.
And so everybody's incentivized to do this.
And the former prosecutor said exactly the same thing today. That's exactly right, yeah. He said
And that's what
their
you're
job
gonna
is to,
Get them.
get them. Yeah, that's, he used those words. Those are the words. Go ahead, Ruth. And then we'll open it up to questions, so get your questions ready.
I think from
Oops, I don't think it's working, I'm sorry. Yeah, wait till it, let me just make sure it's on. It's important, okay. Hold it close to your mouth.
Yeah,